Our next panel is a very important one. It's on education. And we were able to see on the high seas some young people engaged in the analog in Hawaii. And it was encouraging to see some young people like that who had an interest and a desire to explore and be involved in the program. But I think getting young people interested in science and engineering is a real problem, not only within this country, but throughout the world. And a lot of young people aren't going into engineering and science. And the next panel, I think, is going to address that, getting young people excited about space, excited about going into engineering and math and science. And we have a very good moderator. Barbara Morgan is the moderator. Barbara has a great background in education. She got her degree from Stanford University in biology and then went on into teaching. Was selected as a backup to Krista McAuliffe as a teacher in space back in 1985. Brought in as an astronaut in 1998 and flew on STS-118 up to the space station. She is now with Boise State University, an educator in residence, and with a co-appointment both in engineering and education. So let me turn it over to Barbara.
Thank you, Mr. Abbey. Well, good afternoon, everybody. And I would like to start by echoing everyone's comments and comments of gratitude to Dr. Alford and to Mr. Abbey for really bringing us all together to share ideas, share some challenges, share opportunities, and do it internationally. And as Mr. Abbey just mentioned, we had an example of some wonderful, wonderful young people who are getting or have the education. They definitely have the motivation and the drive to do the kinds of work to help take us forward in space exploration, way away from low Earth orbit and well into the future. And the way that's going to happen, again, as Mr. Abbey mentioned, is how do we attract, develop, and retain the next generation of space medicine scientists, engineers, explorers, and to borrow a word from our NASA Administrator, Charlie Bolden, pioneers. So we will address a number of topics. We have a wonderful set of panelists who come with great experience from all over this planet in education. And I'd like for them each to take just a couple minutes. You can do it a little more than 37 words, but just a couple minutes to share your programs and your thoughts, especially in terms of how we stimulate interest in science and engineering education and the benefits of having an international education program or collaboration among our different countries. So, and we're not going to go. I taught elementary school for many, many years, and you would never go down the line. So we're going to mix it up a little bit. So Francisco, I'd like to start with you and give a very brief introduction. Francisco Fusco is Boeing rocket propulsion engineer who is also the executive director of the Foundation for International Space Education. And this organization provides space-based academic instruction in a collaborative environment to international high school students while offering an introduction to the aerospace industry. Francisco.
Yeah, so the foundation core objective is to promote STEM studies and international collaboration, and we do that through several programs and projects. Among that is the World Science Fair and the Dream Host, but specifically the USS, which is the United Space School. This project started back in '95. Back then was called ISS, International Space School. And I was already serving as country manager for Italy when in 2007 we changed it into USS and we founded the FISE, the Foundation for International Space Education. So the program, it brings together students from all over the world. We do touch all 5 continents. I think along the almost 20-year span of the program, we did touch among 30 countries. This year, the US 2014 class is exactly 50 students from 23 countries. And so the idea is to get those students together for designing a mission to Mars. The program is very well articulated. There's a lot of activities, and we keep tweaking every year because we do listen to students and mentors that participate in the program each year. And so basically right now we're dividing them in 5 teams. Each team is specifically as a part of the mission. So there's one team that is, of course, doing the budget and is established a mission control. There's one team that is dedicated to the close planet proximity. So basically, it depends what type of mission they decided to do, if it's a direct to Mars or if it's just going to Leo and then going to from Leo to Mars, etc. Then there's the team that goes for the transfer, the Mars transfer, the team that established the base on Mars, and the team of the science, so the one dedicated to what we're going to do once on Mars, and including building up a rover. So it's pretty complicated, but it's amazing what they can do. The program starts with the selection of students in each country. By April, we started to send out assignments. So they do have a bi-weekly assignments there to turn in until they come here, which is at the end of July, for the 2 weeks that we hosted here in Houston, actually at the University of Clear Lake, University of Houston Clear Lake. And so that's where they have to put everything together, and it's amazing what they can come up with. We saw them all, from space elevators to rocket. They have the first stage liquid and second stage boosters, all kinds of things that you will not normally think of it. But the important thing is the way that those students get together. It's the sharing of culture from all those countries, and how those over the years you see that you really make a difference in their life. We stay in contact with all the students, and it's amazing what they want to return to the school itself. So it just I let usually the students talk about what the result the school has, and it's very, very, very fortunate to be working with this program. So.
We're glad you're doing it. Thank you, Francisco. Okay, our next I'd like to turn to Dr. Steve Mackel. And as you all know, I believe that Dr. Mackel is the director of our Lunar Planetary Institute. And just for folks who are not familiar with LPI, it's a division of the University's Space Research Association. It was established during the Apollo missions to foster international collaboration and to serve as a repository for information gathered during the early years of the space program. It has a long life, and today LPI is known as an intellectual leader in the lunar and planetary science, and the research carried out at LPI supports NASA's efforts to explore the solar system, and the Institute develops education and public outreach programs that engage families, educators, and students at all levels in space science and enhance the public appreciation of lunar and planetary science. Dr. Mackel.
I don't think it should surprise anybody here that space science is probably the most inspirational section of our community in terms of engaging and holding interest, especially from young people. And a recent example, of course, was the Mars Science Laboratory Curiosity, when it landed on the surface of Mars. The 7 minutes of terror engaged very, very broadly across the world, connected to a vast number of people. Unfortunately, most of those lost interest a bit longer than 7 minutes after the landing, but not that much longer. The role of the LPI and the education programs that we have is to step beyond inspiration, to bring engagement, and once you've got engagement, to hold the engagement and to sustain that for a lifetime with the people that we connect with. The important thing there, obviously, is to draw people into STEM-related fields, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and hold them there so that they can contribute in a broad way, not just to space sciences, to space engineering, but broadly across the community so that they can add to the horsepower internationally, but especially in this country, in terms of our engineering skills, our innovation, areas that are critically important to the future of the country. So we see our role in education as very, very important. As was noted, we connect at a range of different levels, ranging from formal education, where we help teacher education programs, to engaging in informal education settings, which are libraries, planetariums, museums, and so on, all through undergraduate education into more public outreach and connecting to the broader public at large. And you could say, okay, this is a small institution, how can you claim to do all that? Well, what we do is we follow a kind of a train-the-trainer approach, which is, in a sense, we connect to educators, whether they're formal educators or informal educators, in various environments, and we train master teachers. We train librarians who are their state or local representatives to bring space sciences material into their environments. Anybody who's worked with elementary schools, middle school environment knows that more often than not, the science teachers actually don't have a very strong background in science. And often they lose their kids because they're afraid of the subject material, and the kids pick it up and they don't follow through. Because if you've got a teacher who's afraid, then the kids are afraid, and then they move on to other areas. So the trick from our side is to try and get people comfortable with the materials they're presenting, and we do that by reaching, a couple of dozen master teachers at a time, and then they go back to their environments, and then they provide their teachers that they connect with the materials and the understanding and the background to be able to use those materials going forward. And the materials that we provide to them from this program, from the space program, are amazing. Where else could you find such amazing images, such inspiring images, such inspiring things to bring to people that would bring them back and say, okay, I really want to be a part of that. We've seen that in the Apollo era. It still exists today. It's a very different day now. We're no longer looking at grainy television sets. We're looking at, blogs. So we're looking at social media. We're looking at how do you leverage the social media you have available today, which means that a lot of the kids out there have got soundbite level kind of connections to things. So how do you leverage that capability and get the kids and hold them? And it's not just the kids, it's the adults too. It's the whole sector of the population that you want to connect into and draw into the program. So we do that in many different ways. We're also at the LPI, we're the forum, the NASA forum for planetary sciences, which is where we're officially the glue that holds the various informal education components together across the country, across the nation. And we act in that role. We also are involved in pipelining. We run the NASA intern program, part of the NASA internship fellowships and scholarships, where we place students every year in NASA centers across the country to do mostly summer programs, but also throughout the year. And so we have an engagement there. We're also involved in a similar program with the Air Force. And so we're doing kind of working, and those sorts of experience for young people really, really do connect them in. What I'd just like to finish that long list of things with is that we are concerned about the future going forward. We've seen some things happening recently, particularly with the administration, where the administration in this country, where we've seen attempts to implement what I think is probably a very good plan. It's called the COSTEM plan, which is a nice way of trying to consolidate activities with an education and outreach into a more coherent grouping that's more efficient, more effective. But the current implementation breaks the connection between the science and the educators. And we're trying to find ways now to make up for that. We've seen a lot of money go from education, supporting education within the science part of NASA. And that's a real problem for us. And so we do see some challenges going forward, and we're working the best we can to try and work around those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next I'd like to go overseas and go to Dr. Steve Harwich from the UK, Professor of Human and Applied Physiology, Director of the Centre of Human and Aerospace Physiological Sciences at King's College London. And Dr. Harwich, if you could maybe talk to us on both levels, what you're doing at the university level and then some of your K-12 outreach. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak here. I was actually here speaking, kindly invited by Mr. Abbey and Dr. Alford back in 2010. And since then, there's actually been a number of interesting developments in the UK as regards human spaceflight generally. But we've also taken that opportunity to try and move forward the educational aspects that we could build on from that. So there's two levels. The first, which is the rather parochial one, which is our own programs. Since 2010, we've run an MSc program entitled Space Physiology and Health, which we run in collaboration with Volker Dammen's group, the Crew Medical Support Office at the European Space Agency. And this has developed into a very nice international and collaborative master's program, a full 1-year intensive MSc program. The theme that's been running through a number of these sessions has been the international level of collaboration. And I'm delighted that in regard to our own work, our collaboration with Volker's group at ESA has been very productive. So we have international students coming. We act as a conduit to allow not only the talk programs to occur at King's and also in Cologne, but also for our research projects as part of that MSc to be taken to laboratories throughout the world. So our students have actually been able to go to as far to Japan, to Moscow, to other places within Europe. So we talk about international collaboration, and there's been a lot of talk about Europe and the United States and Russia, but also within Europe there's increasing collaboration, which is really good to see, particularly in the light of the current recent European elections, which some of you may have seen, which is not always the case that people want to be so collaborative. But that's been working really well. So in regard to other aspects that we've been looking to develop, we've been working very closely with Chris Barber and the International Space School Educational Trust. And since 2012, we've been hosting the Mission Discovery Programme. So this is a program, an outreach program, designed to inspire school children aged 14 to 17 to engage in science. And from our general thrust, it's more of the biomedical science angle that we push. And this is a week-long summer school where we've had over 220 children coming to King's for a week in the summer, where they have a program of lectures where we use the focus of space to inform them about physiology and biology. They have various NASA team-building activities. We've been very lucky to have Ken Ham and his wife there for the week driving this program. But the running theme of the program has been the children work in small teams to design an experiment to run on the International Space Station. So they actually learn, first of all, coming up with scientific ideas. These are students mentored by the science PhD students at King's College, come up with an idea, develop a program, cost it, deliver a presentation, and the idea being that the winning presentation has their experiment running on the International Space Station. And we're delighted that this year, the 2012 winners, in fact, the winners and runner-ups experiments flew on the Orbiter 1 mission up to the International Space Station. And delighted that Koichi Wakata was actually involved in undertaking these 2 experiments that the children designed. So within a small period of time, just 1 week, they came up with a simple experiment. One was testing the effectiveness of antibiotics in space, and the other one was looking at the ability of slime mold to grow in 3 dimensions as opposed to 2 whilst in a microgravity environment. So these are very simple, but experiments which really engaged the children from the whole scientific process through to the as we all know as scientists, the failure often of experiments not working as we hope they will do. But it's been a great experience. And the other thing that was very nice about this program is that it really cut across the cross-section of school children. So we have a widening participation scheme at King's College now. A lot of UK universities are very much encouraged to do this. It's part of our new funding criteria that we do this. But the King's College outreach program, K+, sponsored a number of places, over 100 places on this program. So what this enables us to do is to actually integrate kids from the local area, perhaps not so well-off children from more disadvantaged backgrounds, with those from a more prosperous background which can afford to pay to come on the program. So actually there's a great social mix as well. So we're really encouraged by that. We're running the program again in 2014. So this coming July we have another week-long program. So we're delighted to be hosting that. So we're very enthused by the fact that Tim Peake is going to be the first European or the first UK astronaut as part of the European Astronaut Corps who's going to fly on the International Space Station in 2015. And these are all things which are really hosting and honing, I should say, interest in spaceflight within the UK. As has already been mentioned before, it's a great way in which to engage kids and get them interested in science. And in the UK particularly, space still really does sell. So from both the sort of master's level of program delivery through to school children, I think we're really moving forward quite positively using space as a means of improving interest in the STEM subjects. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks. Okay, next, Mr. Seth Margolis, who's the Director of Education at the Museum of Flight. You heard a little bit about the Museum of Flight earlier when Bonnie Dunbar was introduced, because Bonnie was the director at the Museum of Flight for many, many years and really brought forward great programs that got into the K-12 outreach in a big way. So Seth follows in her footsteps and takes them to the next level. Seth does a lot of different programs, but I have asked him to please specifically talk about the Aviation High School and a little bit about the Washington Aerospace Scholars. Thanks.
So since I'm also an educator and I like to make it like my class, how many of you have been to the Museum of Flight before in Seattle? All right, so I can make up anything, really, at this point. It's made out of gold and floats. The Museum of Flight is the largest private air and space museum in the US, if not the world. It's a private group. A lot of people think it's actually a Boeing museum, but actually it's located on Boeing Field, but it's a private museum. We serve about 150,000 plus participants in our education initiatives. That is at the museum. It's also outreach programs. We actually have staff that go around the world now to deliver programs. Recently they're in Qatar, they've been to Malaysia doing education programs. We have distance learning programs and blended learning programs, which is the Washington Aerospace Scholars Program, which I'll talk about momentarily. But one of the latest and most unique initiatives that we have right now is our partnership with Raisbeck Aviation High School. And Raisbeck Aviation High School is a public school run by the Highline School District, which just actually opened up on the museum property. So we've got a high school on our campus with 400 students who are taught every subject through the lens of aviation. So they're actually doing English through the lens of aviation and humanities through the lens of aviation. A number of years ago, they actually did a Macbeth play in our theater through the lens of aviation. It was Macbeth on an airplane. So you can see the school's like, but these are 400 students that are absolutely dedicated to aerospace. We're benefiting at the museum through a wide variety of reasons. So we've got a farm team of 400 people who love the museum and love aerospace and make it very easy for us to take our job as an inspirational place to that next level. The kids, you see them all the time at the museum. They're walking through the galleries. It's not a museum. It's not the museum. It's their museum. They talk about it with a lot of pride. The other day I was walking past Air Park and the kids were actually doing their homework underneath the Concorde and Air Force One, which is a pretty great place to do homework. The kids are now kind of fully integrated into the museum as the museum being their laboratory. We have many students that volunteer with the museum after school. We have many students that actually have become staff at the museum. Kids over the spring break were doing their final projects at the museum. A young lady named Abby was in costume leading activities in the gallery, which is pretty great if that's how she's spending her spring break. That's a pretty good sign of the future. We had students doing presentations in our World War I and World War II gallery, not about World War I or World War II, but about wing design. And they're just using our exhibitry and our space to talk about that. And then the most unique project was the English class recently was looking at space and creating projects about space and presentations. They'll actually be doing presentations in our space gallery on Thursday and Friday, but they learned how to use our library at the museum to do their research. So our librarian went to the class before, taught them how to do research, taught them how to use our library, actually gave them access to the online museum catalog, which as a staff member, I don't even have access to the online museum catalog, so I wrote down the address really quickly. But the kids then did all their research for these presentations in our library. And I just thought I'd share some of the topics that they picked to do the research of. Space medicine, perfect for this conference. Effects of space travel on body and mind. And I don't even know what this one means. Einstein-Rosen bridge theory. That's what the kids in 9th grade are selecting to do for their presentations. So I'm looking forward to seeing their presentations in action next week when they're at the gallery. The other program that we have, which is unique, so if you imagine Washington Aviation High School, 4-year school, the kids kind of weave in and out of the museum programs. We have a program called Washington Aerospace Scholars, which is actually for high school juniors. A lot of students from AHS are involved in that program. That is a blended learning program in which it's an online curricula developed by NASA and the museum, and then it's a week-long residency at the museum in which the students will go see engineering programs, go to the University of Washington, go to Boeing, go to a bunch of different facilities. At the same time that they're learning all about that aspect of aviation, they're also planning a mission to Mars. And at the last day, they present their findings to their parents and to invited VIPs. The great thing about that program is now the students that do that program qualify for credit from the University of Washington. So any student who goes through that first part of the program can receive 5 credits from the University of Washington. So if you imagine the Museum of Flight has this continuum of learning where we have students coming in as kindergartners, moving all the way up to the museum, going to high school at the museum, and actually able to get credit through their museum participation. So we really view ourselves as an inspirational tool that are giving these kids the chance to really find themselves in aerospace, and then we can support them as they move through aerospace.
Thank you, Seth. And if you have a young person come up to you and very confidently and comfortably start asking you questions about your careers and your jobs, especially if you were in the hiring mode, they might ask that, and then they hand you their card, their business card, you might check to see if they come from Aviation High School. It's really remarkable. Okay, also from the Museum of Flight is Mr. Jeff Nunn, who's with us, and Jeff is the space exhibits lead. So Jeff, maybe tell us a little bit different aspect of the Museum of Flight.
Yes, thank you. So while Seth and his education crew deal with sort of the very focused kids who are at the museum for the purpose of learning about education, we reach the broader audience who comes for any number of reasons, whether they're coming with their family, they're coming to get away from their family after Thanksgiving. We serve approximately 500,000 visitors every year from all over the world. In 2011, we built the Charles Simonyi Space Gallery. It's a 16,000 square foot gallery named for the first person to pay his way to space twice. Charles Simonyi, who began at Microsoft and flew up to ISS on Soyuz twice. It was part of our bid to meet the NASA requirements to get a space shuttle orbiter. Well, obviously, we did not get an orbiter, but we did get the full fuselage trainer, which was previously located at Building 9 right here in Johnson Space Center, and it has proven to be a wonderful asset for the museum, and it's very unique. And one of the greatest things about it is while the orbiters are great display pieces, people can get up close to the outside of them. With the FFT, we're actually able to provide visitor access to go into the crew compartment of the FFT pending certain mobility considerations and the like, and really give people an experience of what it was like to train as an astronaut and to experience the shuttle from the astronaut's perspective, which is the inside of a space shuttle. So for the past 3 years, we've been developing exhibitry around the FFT, and as we've been developing this exhibitry, because we have something that's like a shuttle but not quite, we've had to refine our exhibitry for it, and we really settled on this theme of preparation. And it has sort of 2 levels. One is, what does it take to prepare to go into space? What do you need to know to get to space? And then what have we learned in the 50 years of spaceflight that has allowed us to go further? And as we've been researching this, one of the things that we've encountered, and I'm sure some of you have experienced this as well, is we get visitors who come in all too often and say, well, it's too bad that NASA was canceled. And it's been our experience that there is very much an interest still in space, but there's also a lot of confusion. And one of the things that we as museum professionals are very good at is taking very technical subjects like spaceflight and breaking them down into a way that the general public can digest easily. and can understand. So one of our goals for this gallery is to help untangle the mix of things that are going on currently in spaceflight, from public-private partnerships to commercial spaceflight to what NASA is trying to do now with Orion, and as well as their robotic exploration programs, and to untangle that web that the general media seems to have a hard time explaining to the public, and to make it understandable to the public. So in terms of, and that has been a very collaborative process for us. We've been reaching out to private companies, both companies that have been working for a long time in aerospace, like Aerojet has been a very excellent partner in this exhibit process. We've also reached out to some of the new startups like Planetary Resources, some of the nonprofits like the B612 Foundation, and then some of the folks who are currently working on ISS, where we've got an excellent partnership developing with Caucus, for instance, to help them get their story out there. And at the same time, in order to help broaden our reach, we're also partnering with museums, including all of the organizations that got space shuttle orbiters, as well as folks like the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, the Great Lakes Science Center, because we've realized as a museum community, we're all working on space exhibits right now, and we're all trying to tell a very similar story. So we're trying to pool our resources in order to get that information out to a broader audience. So that's what we're doing from the exhibit side of things.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Okay, we're going to go to another side of the planet now, and Dr. Sergey Ryazanskiy. Sergey, I hope I didn't butcher your last name. Cosmonaut, you met him earlier, and Sergey served on ISS Expedition 37 and 38, about 6 months on orbit, and just recently returned, actually, in March, just a couple months ago, so very fresh off the International Space Station. He's got a background in biochemistry and served as a research scientist for many years for IBMP, but he's on the panel because of his passion for education. And through Sergey's initiative and teamwork with IBMP, has done a great job with educational outreach to youngsters. So Sergey, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We all know that for astronauts and for cosmonauts, educational part is really important, and it is part of our job. And it is normal when, if you're really interested in something, you really want to share your interest with other people, and especially with a young generation. So your interest will definitely have a bright future. So this is really, really important for us. And it's great that I've heard many different projects are running in different parts of our world concerning space exploration and space science. I would mention several that we managed to organize. A few years ago in IBMP, we organized kids' space experiments. They flew on biosatellite Photon 3M. 5 kids' experiments flew for 2 weeks, then returned back for kids to analyze what they've got. And for several reasons, this project was cancelled, but still, all these years, every year, we receive several hundred new projects from kids from all over the country through to Children Foundation. So we're giving them theoretical prize with no spaceflight practice, unfortunately, but maybe I hope that someday we will be able to repeat this project. Also in Star City, a few years ago, in Cosmonaut Training Center, was created Cosmo Center, or Space Center, especially for kids. So it's a training facility with great training kits, with mock-ups of spacecraft, with specially trained instructors that are working with kids, showing them how to fly, what are difficulties, what is fun. And we're all giving presentations there, and also in a summer kids camp. By the way, one of them in Russia also has really brilliant space museum. It's Orleanik on the bank of Black Sea. Every year they have 1 month, specially space month, where people all over the country interested in space gather there. Approximately 100 kids, different age. And this is really interesting to work with them. Also from that kids camp, we designed new projects that now is really often running in Star City. By the way, one of the main designers of this educational program in Star City is wife of Vladimir Titov, Alexandra Titova. Unfortunately, she was not able to come here, but she should be here. She is now working with kids, another her project. And so that idea was started when we were working with really small kids. It's really hard, especially for scientists, to explain to young kids these really clever, complicated science ideas. And I found that many scientists need to be trained how to talk with usual people and with kids, especially, because they need interpreter from science language to normal language for normal person to understand what the hell this smart person is talking about. For kids, they will fall asleep in 15 minutes if we will have such guy giving brilliant science presentation. That's why we made special projects. A special project. It raised from team building psychological technique, so-called, maybe you heard, rope class. It's very popular in Europe and in Russia, a technology to train small business companies to work as a team, to help each other, to listen to each other. So it's really, really psychologically special business training class for team building. So we a little bit redesigned it because it's role-playing and games. Kids really like games, so we use this, combining with science tasks, role-playing in crew, so they need to choose their role in their space crew and really follow this role through the whole project. So this is also really important. And tasks in this course, they're so designed that it's impossible to do it yourself or with your friend. Only the whole team can succeed completing this exercise. So these are really different projects, but I'm really happy to participate in both of them. And before flying, and now this summer, we also continue our work in this field, and I think that it is really, really important for the whole space international program and for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sergey. Okay, Dr. Bonnie Dunbar. I won't give a long introduction since you had some introduction, but a veteran of 5 space flights. Right, you heard about her past, but right now she is she's a professor at the University of Houston. But in particular, she developed and leads the new STEM Center at the university, which brings together many different science, technology, engineering, and mathematics departments on campus, and really, I'll let Bonnie talk about it, but there's a big K-12 component, outreach component to it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Barbara. So I'm going to assume that everyone knows what STEM means, but I've learned not to make that assumption. I had a gentleman walk into my office the other day wanting to know where I was conducting my stem cell research. So this is an acronym, of course, that emerged about 15 years ago here in the United States, and it stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. Of course, in reality, technology is an outcome of those, but when I think the National Science Foundation put the acronym together, they needed to put the T in for whatever reason. This is really data-driven, and we've all worked on programs, and Washington Aerospace Scholars was an outreach of Texas Aerospace Scholars, and I think you were doing something similar in Idaho, because we think it's important for the next generation and where we're going in the future. And as I tell my fellow engineers, we ought to be developing 2 replacement units for each of us. So SRUs, self-replacement units. What is the driver? What's the imperative right now? Well, the imperative started out actually about 15 years ago when the acronym was developed, because we saw these trends in declining enrollments and graduations in engineering and in the hard sciences, we called it, physics, chemistry, and even biology. And it started to appear within NASA and the federal government. In fact, I was working for Mr. Abbey at the time, and we were concerned about this graduation rate because it starts to impact your research within a country. And when I visited with the NSF, I'd not seen the data before, but at that point we saw that the graduation rates in engineering in particular was starting to decline in about 1987. So what was happening? And as we started looking down into the pipeline, we had up until that point not had any programs that I was aware of that went down below the university level, but that's how Texas Aerospace Scholars came to be. We visited with the Texas legislature. I remember that trip. Captain John Young was on that trip as well, Mr. Abbey, and we were able to secure funding for that program along with funding from other entities such as the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, which I think still funds it. And it became a very effective program as a pathfinder for the Washington Aerospace Scholars Program, which was eventually funded from both private sources and then finally through the governor's office at the state of Washington. In 2005, the National Academy of Engineers became engaged in this discussion, and some of you probably saw their report, Rising Above the Gathering Storm. And there's a sentence that follows that. But they identified several problems, one of them the graduation rate, but also the production of math and science teachers at the K through 12 area. And that was a significant problem. That was a long study. It was rolled out just before the State of the Union speech. In fact, I was at the State of the Union speech, and we thought that there was going to be a large budget increase to solve this problem. Unfortunately, it was cut from the speech before it was delivered, and it didn't happen. We all then took this momentum and started to apply it in the federal government, in private industry, but the needle wasn't moving. And so in 2010, the National Academy of Engineers self-funded their own study. It was called Rising Above the Gathering Storm, Cat 5. For those of you that live in the Gulf Coast here, Category 5 is the worst hurricane you can possibly have. Well, I think we must have had a translation problem to other parts of the country that don't have Cat 5 because it didn't result in much. There was some increase in dollars. Well, we're still in this country, and I know in the UK, and I've actually been over to talk STEM in Germany. We have some challenges in recruiting young people into science and engineering. We started the Scottish Space School about 10 years ago, and we have an exchange with Scotland, so we do that on an international basis. In 2012, then, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology put out their own report. It was called PCAST, Engaging to Excel. And it set a goal for the nation in the United States to add 100,000 new graduates in science and engineering each year for 10 years, or 1 million new on the baseline. And as we approach the middle of 2014, the needle's still not moving very much. And in fact, before he passed away, the president of the National Academy, Chuck Vest, gave a presentation on investment for the last 30 years in just this challenge and where the needle was, and the needle just wasn't moving very much. So we need to find a way to take these best practices and these great programs and move the needle much faster and much higher. I was invited to come to the University of Houston to start a STEM center. We're now one of 136 universities across this country doing something never been done before. We're investing in K through 12 education in our communities, either through collaboration or direct investment on programs on our campuses, because we have too few teachers that can explain to our kids, what does a scientist do? What does an engineer do? And it's a collaboration with 4 colleges, the College of Engineering, the College of Natural Science and Math, and some campuses that's arts and sciences, but that's physics and chemistry and math, the College of Education, and we have a College of Technology as well, and I work with all 4 deans. And we and the president of the university, President Couture, are committed to moving the needle in our communities. And we're working with the school districts and the independent school districts, as well as many schools. In fact, we're starting to host the Science and Engineering Fair of Houston on our campus starting next year. So we'll have the winners, 23,000 students that are down selected to 1,400. But they and their parents and hopefully their teachers will be on our campus next February, and will have an opportunity to see us. So as I've sat back and have, talked to students for 40 years or so, and I know we can inspire the students once we have them, and we can engage them. Our challenge, what's different between now and when I was inspired by the Apollo program and walking out into the yard, on a cattle ranch with my parents looking for Sputnik, what's different? Well, what's really different is exposure and promotion. We're not exposed in the daily press on a positive way about space and space exploration. When I talk to professional groups, even here in Houston, most of them don't know about the International Space Station. They don't know that other countries launch into space. They're sort of stuck about 40 years ago when there's only 2 countries. And I would say almost 100% of my audiences in the last 2 years didn't know that China was launching into space. So we need to find ways to creatively provide more exposure and positive exposure for all the partners in the press. I don't have an answer for that. We've started working with our public broadcasting system TV here in Houston, PBS. We're looking at creative ways to provide more exposure, because at the very least, every group in Houston ought to know we're in space, because everybody in space that talks to us says Houston, the first words out of their mouth, right? Houston, this is the station, or Moscow, this is the station, Moscow. So collectively, I think we need to strategize on this, and I know we have a working group a little bit later. So exposure first, inspire, engage, and we need public literacy. I've had teachers tell me they don't advise their children to go into engineering because their students like to work with people. I had a first grade teacher who told me, I don't teach space to my kids because what did it ever do for me? We need nice, short, snappy answers, and we need to make them public. Thank you.
They're probably also not encouraging their children to go into teaching as well.
Okay.
It's a wide problem. Before we open up to the audience for questions, but great job, everybody, thank you. I'd like to go back, there are many wonderful programs all over the world, and these are samples of them. I want to go back to one program, Seth, if you can speak for a couple minutes, just because it's an example of a space-based program that is international as well, and that's our Challenger Center for Space Science Education. So Seth, if you can maybe talk about that a bit.
Sure. The Challenger Learning Center Network, which is, there's around 50 Challenger Learning Centers across the world at this point, mostly in the US, but also Canada, Korea, and the UK. And they are each center is essentially a 2-room immersive simulation environment for students, 4th grade and up, and actually a lot of adult groups as well, to really discover what it's like to have that team mission sense that actually you were talking about as well, that is part of the space program. And the way the Challenger is set up is that there's a space environment and a mission control. And the mission control side works with the spaceship side to do a series of activities or different things that go on during a mission, and then about 5 minutes into the mission, an emergency happens. Oxygen failure or radiation leak, and the mission control side
It's
has
real.
Going
Back to the previous panel, it's a real.
For the kids, though, it's very real. They oftentimes will cause their own emergencies by freaking out and turning off the power to their station. So, which I don't know if real that is, but that certainly feels real to them. But the mission control side has to work with the spaceship side to figure out how to solve the emergency on the spaceship. They solve the emergency, they go back to going to the moon, Mars, finding a comet, and then another emergency happens, and they have to work together as a team, and then they actually switch halfway through. But during that midpoint debriefing, they get together with their partner and actually talk about ways that they can become a stronger team. And oftentimes it's everything to do with communication. I don't understand the note that you're sending. You're not sending me the right information, all of the different things that you'd have to do. And then when they do the second part of the program, it is a lot smoother because now they're working as a team. Because it is space-based, Mars, Moon, or Comet, they're also learning that content as well. It's pretty great when you have a 4th grade group from a small community come in and you ask them questions about the moons of Mars, and they were able to answer it and know more about the content than some of the instructors, but that's also a good thing. But we get in there, and the great thing about it is that they are completely absorbed within the first minute. I shared a story with some people yesterday. We actually had a very bad earthquake in Seattle a number of years ago. In the Challenger Center, at the moment the earthquake hit, the kids' ship was being hit by micrometeorites, and so the whole museum shook, and the kids kept on going, as if that was part of the mission. They were so focused, we had to work with them to evacuate them from the museum. One little guy yelled out, "This is the best field trip ever." But it just shows you they worked through an earthquake. Everything else was going nuts, and they're still focused on it. It's a very powerful program because it's harnessing that power of simulation and immersion, and they're really working together as a team.
Thank you, Seth. So let's just open it right up to the audience. Questions, comments?
Thank you. That's very interesting from all of you. So there's a lot of emphasis on STEM, obviously, and we all know why. And there was a real reason why that was introduced as a concept, if you like, when Bonnie was talking about it. I was recently visiting Congress in DC, and we were trying to promote the space program by talking, depending on who you were talking to, you pick education or you pick Homeland Security. So, we all play our little games. But when a couple of the people we talked to with STEM, I found out there's a thing called the STEAM Caucus. And this isn't about going back to the golden age of trends. This is about adding arts back into STEM, which actually isn't too bad. I mean, Ms. Margolis, you were talking about the English class and bringing that in. What I'm concerned about a little bit, I think it's important because it's all about creativity, but it has to be done correctly because otherwise we then forget about the STEM part, and why we started that in the first place. And so I'd be interested in the panel's comments about whether this is a good thing, how we would do it well, and because it does engage a lot more people.
Could I comment on that? Yes, because I've been approached by the Caucus. They have a tremendous Twitter campaign going on right now. I do agree with you. I went to a school that has adopted STEAM. And by the way, STEM never was meant to exclude arts, because we talk about creativity in all of our classes and ingenuity and all of those things. But STEM was identified because we have a shortage of those careers and skill sets, and it's part of our problem too, because it's aerospace. So right, I went to a school that had adopted STEAM, and they did a poster session, And I would say that 75% of the posters were art projects. So you run into the danger. There's an emphasis or an interest in trying to get funding for STEAM as part of the STEM funding. And I've told them many times, I'm very supportive of the arts. I'm a terrible artist, but I like to do that. And I like piano, not very good. I play for myself, don't come by. But, you know, we need to keep that a very focused thrust, my feeling.
If I could just add a couple of comments there too. A couple of years ago, and I think it may have been one of the first ones, one of the bioastronautics meetings here in Houston had a humans in space art competition. And there have been a couple of these. In fact, in the last few years, we've seen quite a number associated with meetings and various other activities which engage kids very, very broadly right across the world, because it's all being done virtually. And it gives opportunities. That first one had people, a lot of submissions of painted art, drawing, but also musical pieces that were written. They all had to have a space theme and a space connection. And there were some incredible things coming from classes. There was one class in China, for example, for that meeting, that the entire class did art and submitted it, for example. And it was just one class, and that was the projects that they were working on for that period of time that they were working on them. But we had several musical pieces, and there were, I think, Neil, remind me, there were, 2 pieces of music played at the meeting itself, as well as the art was put up as well. These sorts of things are a good way of cross-fertilizing and encouraging both the science technology side of the house, but also bringing in the artistic capabilities of the kids, because it's really important that you stimulate the brain in all its ways you can, and try and not polarize these kids into thinking it's either science or arts, but in actual fact, it's all about the education process, and not taking out some aspects of it early on. So not focusing all on the humanities side or on the business side, but keeping a broad education that allows you the flexibility to be able to follow your natural tendencies as you go through school. Because a lot of these things are locked in place early, unfortunately. A lot of kids are locked in place in terms of their tendencies in middle school.
Yeah, I mean, we at the Rice Space Institute, we just had a film festival and art competition, and the product of the winners of the art competition will be shown in October, and they turn out their visual arts as 2 movies. But the reason we did that, it came from a thing we called space exploration and human imagination, and it wasn't so much to bring art and STEM together, it was to indicate the impact of space exploration on our society and culture. And so it was engaging the humanities and the social sciences, not as we all have to do these things together, but we are humans, and some of us do science, and some of us do engineering, and some of us do art, but we have all benefited and we have all been impacted by the space program. So it's a way of expanding the interest without cutting back on, the generation of the creation, not the creation of the next generation of scientists and engineers.
Yeah, I think there's been a confusion of, we want to do the things that you're talking about, because we're also talking about inspiration and public literacy as well. STEM's an acronym for enabling a program. It's not a curriculum, okay? And I think that's where the confusion comes about.
Yeah, and I think actually there are connections between those things. Like in the program that I described before, we do have, during the 2 weeks, there's actually 2 evenings, there's events where the students have to perform. And they have to sing, they have to dance, they have to act, they have to perform and act. And actually we're trying to gather in data, because it's interesting to see the one that, perform best and maybe play an instrument very related with mathematics, and they go to choose a certain type of teams, and others that dance, they're going towards another type of thing. So we try to also to do a study, because there's some correlation there. But yeah, it's important to let them also express besides the engineer, the science type of programs. So we have that in our program, for example.
And Francisco, doesn't that part of your program also help bring the cultural aspects? You use that as a way to help share the cultures?
Yes, and in fact, the performing arts, it's basically a way to share culture. They have to cook, they have to do all kinds of activities, and to share the culture as well. So this is part of that.
So they're
Yeah.
Yeah, for each country they do.
So I wanted,
We just
Seth?
treat art, sorry, as an access point to the other topics. So if you're talking about art, it lends itself very well to design, which lends itself very well to aerodynamics. So there's a natural progression. And so instead of treating it as a one-off or you can't have art and STEM together, it's an access point. They all kind of intermingle. And if you can find that kid who's interested in that topic, and ultimately they're going to be interested in this topic, you use it as an access point and they feed right into it. And it's just a matter of supporting them in the right direction.
And I
So
think
can I just ask, I wanted to ask Sergey and Steve, from your perspectives, from your part of the world, do you want to weigh in on this? No pressure.
Well, from the UK point of view, we've had the same problem regarding STEM and a desire to increase children's interest in the core subjects. I mean, that said, if you go to the higher level, for one of the biggest biomedical funders in Europe is the Wellcome Trust, and a lot of our biomedical research funding comes from that charitable organisation, and they have a very big running theme about art in science, and not that necessarily percolates down to the children, but certainly at one level, the interaction between art and science is still there. But I still think, as a general rule, I've got two daughters myself who are sort of 17 and 18 years of age. It's still a challenge to get children of that age to really focus on the science subjects. They are viewed as being tougher than the art subjects. And it's an ongoing challenge. And I think the space medium is really effective in encouraging and honing enthusiasm in that area. But I've got no further great insights.
Okay, no, that's
to add.
excellent. Sergey?
I think that it's really important, and it's not so hard to combine these two worlds, like science, math, and something really, really serious with nice arts, music, or for girls, beautiful dresses. For example, also working with kids, if they're choosing their role, they're trying to be also useful with what they like, be also useful in other worlds too. So I'm always telling that, hey, it is not my goal to make you to become engineers, scientists, or cosmonauts. You can work and choose your path in your life as you wish. Can be spacesuit designer, or painting walls of future space station, or growing plants also for psychological support. It's your choice. But if you will feel that space and science is something bright, interesting, and something always on the main frontier, this will help you to find the most interesting job in your life. So,
Thank you.
I think just to kind of follow up on that, I think you hit on something very important, which is getting everyone literate about science, not just the people who go in to want to become astronauts or become engineers, but if we have a community, people who are painters or artists or construction workers who are also literate about science, that can only help benefit the scientific community in our efforts to help do what we want to do. So,
yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
More questions?
Yes, I have a very selfish question. We're very excited about the potential for high seas in education and public outreach, and had a number of initiatives and some success, but we've had a lot of trouble reaching, put it this way, the communities that we've have responded to our offers are the ones who are already doing just fine in STEM, already know everything there is to know about space, already very keen. How do you reach underserved communities, ones that aren't already into the program?
Great question, thank you.
It takes a lot of footwork to get out there and find your stakeholder in the community, and then make sure you keep that community stakeholder part and parcel of everything that you do. oftentimes when you're looking to work with communities that are underengaged, they have a wall set up because a lot of other organizations have looked to them to engage them, and after the 2-year grant has borne out, there's no further engagement. So it's helping break down that wall of showing that you're committed to a partnership and engagement with the group, and then finding that advocate and showing that what's in it as the partnership, not what's in it for you or what's in it for them, but how is the project going to benefit everybody. And then even at the most basic level, for us to engage a lot of audiences at the museum, I have to go out and fundraise for buses and financial assistance, knowing that they want to come to the museum, but a group can't afford it. So really, if I want them to enjoy the museum, I need to put a little skin in the game. So it's that kind of relationship for us.
I'm really glad you asked that question, going back to what Nicole was saying earlier. You know, her motivation came very early on from being exposed, and not just exposed, but actually being able to work as a kid in the field. And the more we can provide those opportunities for all of our kids all over the world, the better off we're going to be. I know I'm not supposed to editorialize, but I had to throw that in.
Could I actually just quickly respond to that? The question you raised is actually a very, very important one, because it's so often we spend the bulk of our money supporting programs where we're actually engaging people who already are connected, unfortunately, whether it's in the school systems or whether it's outside the school systems, because those are the kids who have the resources often to be able to access it, but they already are caught up. The underserved communities, particularly the minority communities, have a lot of trouble getting access to the same sorts of resources, getting the same sorts of level of engagement, the same little levels of excitement, and they don't get it at home. So there are some very, very large challenges, and it's not very easy to do in the formal education setting, because the curriculum really doesn't provide you with many opportunities. And so what you find there are the places that you really can, that are available to many of these kids, are libraries, and as much as community libraries still exist, planetariums, museums are incredibly important for this. After-school programs, very, very hard to get into the after-school program activities, but huge numbers of kids who are unengaged are in after-school programs. So trying to get materials and insight and information into those programs is something that we really do have to work more on. But it is very, very challenging to engage those critical parts of our communities.
Thanks. And a great challenge is actually how can we work with the schools?
Yes.
Well, that'll be another conversation.
Speaking of reaching a large number of people, a lot of people are talking about these days about MOOCs and these online courses, and for example, it could be at whatever level you wanted if NASA sponsored one of these programs. So if someone sponsored a space medicine program, then people who are medical scientists in the community could, I think NASA's interesting, I'll maybe watch this, and then they could see it, and then they could see how their research could tie into the problems that NASA's looking at. So it would really reach a community that way. Or if you were interested in school-age children, it could be something that was focused on them, and maybe it could be shown in an after-school program, and they could earn their certificate of accomplishment. And so, you could tailor it to what you wanted. The last course I took, an astrobiology course taught out of University of Edinburgh, there was over 40,000 participants in that, with study groups, online, blogging, everything.
If I can comment on that. So to do a MOOC, you have to be subscribed to one of the platforms, and the University of Houston has subscribed to Coursera, and I'm actually scheduled to develop a mini MOOC, Introduction to Aerospace, and we're going to try to bridge that to both our freshmen in our gateway courses as well as high school seniors. And we hope there'll be some public component to that, because it's going to be a lot about space literacy. Now, whether anybody signs up for it, I don't know.
I think they will. I think we have time for one more question. Is that okay, George? Oops, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You know what? Is there somebody who has not ever had an opportunity the last couple days to ask a question who would like to? And if not,
Microphone on?
Great comments from the entire panel. Thank you so much. Steve, your comment about the federal government, the U.S. federal government, almost eliminating space science education, as well as biomedical science education, as well as oceanography education, that was real. And it took a lot of efforts from a lot of people to turn the mind of Congress around, and the Congress did turn around, and the administration was ordered to reinstate the money that they took away. And that happened, and that was real. So my question to my colleagues here is, if you were in charge, where should we put the money to advance space science education? And that was asking me when I was up there doing the work that I did, where best do we put the money? Do we put it in K-12? Do we put it on undergraduate, graduate, postdoc, informal science education? Where we're going to get the biggest return on investment?
I'd like to answer that because we actually took a look at that. If you look at what happened, they call it the Sputnik moment in this country. We had heard mentioned before. How were we able to develop a brand new workforce to go to the moon and beyond? And part of that was a very concerted effort on education that came through something called the National Defense Education Act. And it was dollars that was used as scholarships and grants to put young people through engineering, and I was one of them. Without that money, I wouldn't be sitting here. I was first generation. No one in my family had ever been to college. One of my parents didn't even have a high school education. But you had to have the grades, and you had to have the SAT. So if you were qualified, if you'd worked hard in high school, it sent you to a university to get an engineering, a physics, chemistry degree, and they also did it for teachers. And in fact, if you went to study education in one of those subjects, you didn't actually have to pay the loan back. I had to pay mine back. They would reduce it, forgive it, on an annual basis for every year you taught.
And we know why.
Teachers, and it put out a great number of teachers in those subjects. Now, in today's dollars, and I escalated the investment that was made for about 5 years there. I was very lucky. I was in that 5-year window. And if you escalated that forward, it's less than $4 billion. That's a drop in the bucket in terms of what we're putting into education. But it was very directed. It was multi-purpose. It built laboratories on campuses. It built exhibits. It was all about our country going to the moon. And so it needs, I think, some coordination and leadership to do it.
Do we have time for one more comment? Go ahead. Thanks.
In answer to your question, I think you need a broad portfolio of activities because the problem is always sustaining the interest. And so you really, there's a number of studies which suggest fairly strongly that you start losing kids that are out in middle school. The issue is not so much fighting to get kids into STEM careers, it's actually maintaining an interest so they maintain the option, the capabilities to go into those careers. And if you don't start working with them at about the middle school age, then there's a very good chance you're going to lose a lot of them, particularly the ones who aren't already engaged. But you do have to have a broad portfolio of activities, and in the end, you actually have to have some sort of a pipeline by which these kids can be brought into, various careers, STEM careers, whether it's in the space sciences or space engineering or whatever. But this is where you really, really want to have good, strong intern programs that are available to undergraduates, where you do the full spectrum all the way through. And I think you can develop a portfolio of activities that is relatively modest in cost and leverages very effectively. The trick is that it needs to be done effectively with a lot of forethought, because the co-STEM is a really very good concept, but implementation has been done incredibly poorly. And we need to, and that's been fixed for the moment. We're worried about next year and the year after. So,
thank you so much. So I would like to wrap this up by bringing it back to the context of this entire summit. I'm going to start with Sergey's quote, if you don't mind my quoting you, Sergey. But we're all in this together because we all have an interest that our interest will have a bright future. And it's all about engaging and inspiring and then helping our students sustain their interest and their rigor so that they can go forward and keep these wonderful space exploration programs going. We heard great programs from all over the country, all over the world, and to quote Sergey again, we have great projects in different parts of our world. We started with the first project with Francisco that actually involved students from all over the world, and several of these projects did. So I would like to end in two ways. One is to just throw out a challenge for all of us, and this goes along with where we put our money, but perhaps we could figure out how to all get together and do one project that involves students from all of us, that has all the components of the things that you folks showed to be best practices. Teamwork, working alongside real engineers and real scientists who learn how to communicate with kids, sharing of culture. They're working as a community, and that community is long-lasting. They remain friends forever. They work in real contexts and in real roles. And we've got a great opportunity here, I think, to pull one big project together as an international community. So thank you. Please help me in thanking our wonderful panelists, and thank you all very much.